Hello, and thank you for joining me on my reading this Friday of 13 Offerings, my first book, anthology fantasy novel. This cover is done by my friend Naomi Gibson, and it is edited by my friend Heath Harper, who goes also by H.H. Raymond. Feel free to follow along in the book if you have a copy, or if you'd like to get a copy. You can get the ebook or paperback at Amazon.com, or you can go to www.aprilwahlin.com. All right. The fog cleared from the crystal surface as the brittle husk of the lily blew away, circling into the air and disappearing before the darkened crystal eye. An enticing tale, brother, Angus announced, first to break the silence. Well told. I've been holding on to that one for some time, Killian nodded. It is a long tale to tell. I look forward to hearing more. In good time, Killian replied. Angus sighed, a slightly exasperated strain in his breath. I believe I hear our brother Bannon on his way down. I'm sure his offerings will be interesting, to say the least. The door to the room opened without so much as a courtesy knock, and Bannon strutted in. His darkly tanned skin made his Cheshire smile stand out all the more. The light caramel brown of his eyes was nearly as bright as his sun-bleached dreadlocks. His clothing was in the fashion of the sailors in the days long gone, a weathered, high-collared leather coat, and billowing undershirt. He seemed to have just stepped off the rolling decks of a tall ship. Hello, my brothers. I have come with a plethora of offerings, he said merrily, taking a seat at the great table. You're late, Bannon, Angus scolded. Do you have any idea what traffic's like from Playa del Rey docks? It's murder even at this hour. I see you all started without me, though. Your clothing is not entirely appropriate for this land. Did you not think to change into something more suitable for the time? I'd make myself even more tardy. Besides, I do not believe the people of this world truly care about such things. On the way here, I passed a group that looked straight out of a medieval circus. He has a point, Killian defended. The fashion of this world has become too muddled for even its people to keep up. I'm sure he brought finer clothes for tomorrow's ball. Finest clothes a man can steal, Bannon smiled. Angus nodded, but it was clear he did not care for his younger brother's brazen nature. Have you seen Connor? He's no doubt distracted by the many electric wonders of this land. You know how he is. How fare your shipmates? Patrick asked, changing topic. They're as well as can be, considering you know who. He's not so bad, Killian defended. Yeah, Bannon scoffed. I bet he's a real peach when you don't work for him. So you have many offerings? Patrick interjected. I do. Tidings of a new crewmate, Bannon replied, rifling through his pockets. Well, as new as a crewman can be aboard an immortal pirating ship. Sounds interesting. Origin stories are always a favorite of the fates. I'll get on with it then, he replied, bowing his head to the dark eye. When he looked up again, his gold eyes quickly misted over. I offer this tale of a young man who joined a crew he was not prepared to meet, but needed more than he knew. A brave young fellow who escaped his dreary life and cast his fortune upon the wind. I present this old compass, once passed through his hands. With that, Bannon placed a sea-worn wood and metal compass upon the oak stump table. The brothers bowed their heads as the compass began spinning in place. Maritime. The shadowy sails of the ship were just visible on the horizon. Jonathan Maritime sighed in relief. Days had passed, and not one had seen another craft. Not so much as a fishing boat had drifted by. Hell, not so much as a fish. The crew of this scurvy wench had managed well enough on supplies, but they had only set out with a week's worth of rations. 14 days they'd been afloat, and they'd just consumed the last of their bread. This small cargo ship was the first vessel Jonathan had been elected to navigate, and fortune, the finicky minx, refused to smile upon him. A bad wind had come. They had suffered nothing but dull weather, choppy waters, and a malfunctioning rudder. The situation was made even worse by the captain, a gluttonous sloth of a man who consumed double his rations every night. In a drunken rage over the storm's damaged rudder, responsible for setting them off course, the captain had blamed Jonathan and thrown his maps and compasses overboard, calling them useless trinkets. Jonathan's skills were such that he could have gotten them home by the stars, but the heavy clouds overhead refused to subside. Even the sun's positioning could not be read thanks to the damnable weather. Jonathan stared up dismally at the distress flag flapping limply in the lifeless wind. He'd been ready to give up all hope when the dark vessel had appeared in the distance. The oncoming ship appeared to have the trappings of the Royal Armada, same hull style, same mast and rigging. Jonathan almost laughed in relief. Help was on the way. It would be the first bit of luck they'd encountered thus far. He squinted at the oncoming ship through the quickly diminishing light, dreaming of a cozy bed back at port. However, as the rescuers came closer, his hope died with the lowering of its Royal Armada flag. In its place now flew a flag with black swords crossed against a white background. Pirates. Jonathan ran below to the captain, who lolled about in a rum-addled daze. He warned the mate and other crew members of the oncoming threat, but they paid him no mind. Panicked, he hurried to the bell and rang it, calling all men to arms. The captain snapped out of his coma by the alarm bell, stormed onto the deck after him. "What's all this?" the captain hollered, hauling Jonathan away from the bell by his shirt collar. Jonathan merely pointed to the grappling hooks flying from the enemy boat onto their own decks. The crew set to cutting the ropes, tethering the dead ship to the attacking vessel, but it was no use. The scurvy wretch was quickly overrun. Shots rang out and steel clashed as the crew attempted to fight off the raiders. The scurvy wretch's men numbered only 15, most of them malcontent sailors, but there were a few worth their salt. Regardless, they were no match for the skilled miscreants of the great dark ship. The battle was short-lived, and Jonathan quickly found himself kneeling with a sword point pressed into his back. He was disgusted to think he would end his days upon this wretched boat. Even in starvation, there had been hope of a favorable wind to blow them back to shore, but now even that small hope was not but a fading memory. Jonathan watched as a great plank slammed onto the railing of the wretch. Spanning the gap between the two, more pirates strolled onto deck, searching every corner for valuables. "Who's in charge here?" a wiry blond man demanded. All turned to the captain, who swayed drunkenly on his knees. "You're joking. No wonder you're out to drift. This man couldn't captain a dinghy." "Knox, don't play with the captives," came a strong voice. The voice had a strange resonance to it, somewhat scratchy, but not the usual baritone of a man at sea. "Yes, Captain," the blonde replied, straightening up and quickly directing a few men to check the cargo hold. Jonathan kept his head low, hoping to encourage the scum to leave him his life. Then his shipmates froze. They knelt, staring straight ahead with jaws agape. Confused, he followed their gaze to a tall figure wearing a red sash and a wide-brimmed hat, a scarlet feather waving from its band. Slim and sharp as a dagger, the figure was topped by a massive tangle of auburn hair that flowed in the wind. The captain of the invading ship cut the oddest figure Jonathan had ever seen on water. The realization slowly dawned on him. The figure was no man. Only once had Jonathan seen a woman don clothing in this manner, but the memory was a painful one, which he did not want to dwell. "Since your captain is indisposed, I wish someone to explain your plight," the lady announced. "I answer to no woman," called the surly old snaggletooth. "As you wish," her voice indifferent. "String 'em up." In an instant, Snaggletooth was trussed and carried away. The woman looked on to the next man, who only sneered. "I suppose you have a similar answer for me." The man would not speak, but quickly found his voice when her crewmen pulled him out of line. Panic screams split the air, and Jonathan turned in time to see Snaggletooth fall from the crow's nest. He cringed, waiting to hear the crunch of bones on the deck. Instead, There was a loud twang as the rope around Snaggletooth's leg went taut, a mere foot before his face connected with the deck. Cheering sounded in the crow's nest. "Look, Captain!" one of the men shouted. "I finally got the rope right!" The captain did not smile. She simply motioned for them to return and looked back to the man next to Jonathan, waiting for a reply. "Ship don't move," the man told her shakily. "The rudder was damaged in the storm," Jonathan called, hoping to save the stubborn man from sharing the fate of Snaggletooth and his silent men. The fearsome woman turned, looking at him for the first time. She would have been a beauty if not for the thin scar running the length of her face. "Who will speak for the ship, then?" she announced, and the man holding Jonathan hauled him to his feet before her. The woman's eyes were impossibly green and familiar. "There's no wind, the rudder's broken, and we have no compass or map." "Seems you are having a run of bad luck." She gave a slight nod, and 3 of her men scrambled to verify the truth of Jonathan's claims. "As I said, the ship was damaged in the storm," Jonathan continued. "We've been afloat for days and have no food. I'm just the navigator. Take what you want, but please, let it not come to bloodshed." The woman glared at him as her men returned to confirm the status of the ship. She nodded to them in dismissal. "You carry weapons and medicine," the woman told Jonathan. "Cure and curse in one shipment." "Bit ironic, isn't it?" Jonathan laughed nervously. There was something in her eye he recognized. For a second, it seemed she recognized him too, but she turned before he could be sure. "Take the weapons, leave the medicine," she commanded to his surprise, and her men quickly carried a dozen crates onto their ship. "Your rudder will be mended roughly. It will hold you until you make port. The weather should clear soon," she told Jonathan, and headed back to the railing and her ship. "Do you need a navigator?" He had no idea where the question had sprang from. It was an inexplicable outburst, but the thought of going back to port with the pitiful crew of the wretch was too pathetic. "You wish to lead us into a storm as well?" she asked coldly. Jonathan hung his head in shame as she continued up the plank. Her men followed until only Knox remained. "Come on then," the blond man called to Jonathan. "Captain McBain doesn't like to be kept waiting." In a flash, Jonathan was on his feet and hurried towards the plank where Knox handed him a spare compass and nodded at the slovenly captain of the scurvy wretch. Jonathan checked the instrument and tossed it to the lush. "Port is northwest," he told the wretched man, and headed across the gangplank to the massive hull of the sinister ship. The great dark vessel took off like a shot, and Jonathan with it. Turned out the bad winds were those of change. "Not bad, no?" Bannon beamed at his brothers as what was left of the old compass flaked away in tiny wood and metal chips. "It's not a competition, Bannon," Angus replied. "Yours is a simple story, yet well told. It's been accepted." "Don't worry, I have plenty more where that came from." "I hold my breath in anticipation," Angus scoffed and turned to his brothers. "Now that you've shared, I suppose it's my turn." "Since you apparently think you can do better," Bannon muttered. "Go on, brother," Patrick encouraged Angus. "Give your offering." And I will go ahead and end there for the next tale next week. See, nice to see you and hear you. Aw, hi Robin, how are you? Yeah, so that was the third story in this 13 offerings. If you haven't quite gathered yet, there are 13 of them. So if anybody has any questions, I can answer them now. Sorry, my voice is still cracking a little bit. I hope you guys were okay with listening to my muddled accents and whatnot. But let's see. Okay, I don't think I see any questions. So thank you guys for all tuning in. I really appreciate it. Again, if you'd like a copy of any of my books, they're available on Amazon and at aprilwahlin.com. And I will hopefully see you guys all next week, again at 6 p.m., unless I get, a bunch of feedback from people saying that this is too early. All right, I hope you guys are all safe quarantining, and I will see you next time. All right.